Fight of the night? I think we agree on this one too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carl Warsam versus Paul Valerin.
Just the greatest 45 seconds in MMA history up until UFC 6.
Yeah.
Just two absolute fucking savages swinging at each other. One of them out to prove that one of them just sales were down at his Taekwondo school, and he was out to fucking resurrect that, get his mortgage back, get his life back together, make his wife fall back in love with him. This guy was putting everything into these punches, and it was just not going to work because he fell right into the trap of the trap master, Big Daddy Polar Bear Flex, OG. What's his name?
Paul Valerin.
Paul Valerin. I'm stalling because I can't remember that big psycho its name.
Welcome to Casual Academy MMA. Join us as we dive deep into mixed martial arts history for every UFC, WEC, Pride, and Strikeforce event. We'll examine the fights and fighters of the past, reviewing the eras, techniques, and revolutions that made our beloved sport the phenomenon it is today. Without further ado, let's watch the fights.
Let's get it on! What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Casual Academy. My name is Nathan Karimi. I'm joined, as always, by my cousin and co-host.
What's up? I'm Kevin Zimbelman.
Tonight, we hopped back into the MMA time machine to sometime in 1995. Another very high elevation fight for UFC 6. If you joined us last time for the return of the beast, we saw Dan Severn take the championship from Dave Bentau in a performance where it seemed kind of like Dan Severn was an unbeatable, dominant wrestler. Dan Severn returns tonight for a super fight with Ken Shamrock. Anything stand out to you, Kev, from tonight?
Just off the bat, the production for UFC got way better.
Way better.
I mean, they even had sponsorships. You could buy our DVDs here. They really put into the marketing of it, use the internet. So that was really interesting to see. Yeah. Other than that, the other thing that stood out for me of this card was just the absolute brutality of it.
Brutal card, man. The most brutal card yet, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There was almost a commitment to brawling. It's almost like they brought guys in for that purpose.
Yeah.
It is actually really funny. It seems like the internet just came out because they keep referring to the World Wide Web and
right.
Yeah, that was fucking hilarious. For me, there was a couple things that stood out. I don't want to give them all away because one of them kind of indicates how a lot of fights ended. But obviously the introduction of Tank Abbott was huge. If you watch the UFC now, if you watch the UFC 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, still in that modern era, at some point in time, you have heard of Tank Abbott. Watching him debut was fucking nuts. At one point in time, he literally told the announcer that he was getting sexually aroused by watching himself in a replay knocking someone out.
Why don't you give us a little commentary on the finish?
Well, all I'm doing is, I'm starting to get sexually aroused. You better get that off.
That was my first introduction to Tank Abbott, other than seeing highlight videos of him, and he is a fucking maniac, dude. I mean, just as crazy as the stories you hear and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
My name's Tank Abbott. I'm going to be the most athletic person that's ever stepped into the Octagon. That, coupled with my experience, will definitely make me the UFC 6 champ.
6 foot, 280 pounds, 30 years old. He's a pit fighter, which I've never heard of until today. And he's going against John Matua, who's a Hawaiian, 29 years old, 6'2", 400 pounds. And he is a Kuialua fighter, which means bone breaking in Hawaii. And the only bone that broke was his jaw after Tank Abbott just annihilated him in under 30 seconds.
Yeah. Dude, this is one of those highlights that you've all probably seen at one point or another, but to see it live with the context and the walkouts and all that shit is nuts. It's fucking brutal. one of the first times that you ever saw someone like taunt an opponent. To this day, I mean, I'm talking, we're at like UFC 312 or something now. To this day, that is one of, if not the worst knockout. No, not the worst, but that's like a top 5 worst knockout ever. This dude was stiff, and Tank was making fun of him. Tank hits hard. He fights different than other people. He's powerful. He's large. He's a fucking maniac. What a debut. That really set the tone for the night.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the most brutal knockouts. Probably hands down the most brutal knockout we've ever seen so far.
Till UFC 6, you mean?
Yeah.
For sure. And again, I will repeat, even all the way up to like UFC 300 something, that's still in the running as like a top 5, top 10 brutal knockout. What do we got for fight number 2?
Fight number 2, we have Carl Warsam versus Paul Valerin. And Carl coming in on 9 days notice, Taekwondo expert. Quoted in his like pre-fight interview, "I'm here to party in the Octagon."
Hi, I'd like to say hello to all my students back home at Folsom Taekwondo. Hi to the wife and kids, and I'm here to party in the Octagon.
So I think you kind of know where this is going. 32 years old, 220 pounds, and he's going up against Paul Valerin, who's 6'8", 300 pounds, trap fighting style. And he's 25 years old. They call him the polar bear. He's like this big ass dude from Alaska. And insane back and forth for a little bit. I mean, this fight had zero defense. These guys were just landing on each other. And it ultimately ended with Paul Valerin's dropping a 12-6 elbow like from hell. I mean, dude, it was
straight to the back of Warsham's head.
Yeah. Face planted Warsam into the Octagon, and it was donezo.
Very done. I mean, man, crazy fight.
Fast and furious.
Fast and furious and crazy.
And Warsam,
I did not see any disciplines at work. I just saw swinging.
And Warsam 80 pounds lighter than Valin.
Well, and 2, if you remember, they said Warsam was either like the world champion Taekwondo guy or like the best Taekwondo fighter in the world, which sounded like absolute bullshit. But when he started throwing down, keep in mind, he's striking up at a dude who's literally a foot taller than him. And he's landing bombs. And frankly, he was overwhelming the trap fighting practitioner until, frankly, he just kind of was forced to go for a takedown, just maybe realizing none of these strikes were working. And that's when Homeboy just dropped this elbow from fucking the
heavens,
space.
Bro. Yeah, from outer space, honestly.
And it was all over from there. Really, 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 really cool fight. Go back and watch. I mean, it's nuts. Absolutely worth going back to watch. All right, Kev, what do we got for fight number 3?
All right, fight number 3, we have Rudyard Moncoyo versus the GOAT, Pat Smith. Rudyard is the first fighter coming out of Ecuador. They call him the Pit Bull. He's a jiu-jitsu and kempo karate expert. 78 wins, 65 by KO, 0 losses. He's 25 years old, 5'10", 205 pounds. I'm thinking to myself, like, we're looking at one of the future GOATs right here.
Yeah.
We're, putting Latin America on the map, I guess.
And on
besides
his back,
Hoist
according
Gracie
to himself.
Yeah. And he's going up against the real GOAT, Pat Smith, who's 2-2 in the UFC at this point.
But otherwise 252-2.
That's right. Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
All knockouts.
Yeah.
He's a kickboxer, 6 foot, 217 pounds, 31 years old. We last saw Pat Smith in UFC 2. He lost to Hoist, right?
Dude, I feel like who the fuck did Pat Smith lose to? Yeah, I guess.
Or Ken.
Oh, lost to Ken, and then he lost to someone else too.
There's only 2 losses are Hoist and Ken, aren't there?
Maybe, yeah.
Anyway, Pat Smith coming out in a wrestling.
Go ahead with the wrestling.
Okay. Pat Smith coming out in a wrestling singlet. So, you kind of thought, we're going to see something different here. And
it was like a thin, halfway see-through, like lingerie one too. That was not like a normal wrestling singlet. That was the gayest thing I've ever seen. I do want to state this. Before this fight started, Kevin gave his prediction For some reason, Pat Smith was his GOAT. Pat Smith was like his most highly regarded fighter for several fights. And Kevin predicted that Rudyard Moncoyo was going to demolish Pat Smith.
I mean,
nothing more opposite could have possibly happened. It was the most lopsided, brutal beatdown ever. Starting with,
dude, that fucking Spartan kick to the chest, bro. I mean, Pat Smith just ran at him full like adrenaline Spartan kick to the chest, knocked what's the guy's name? Moncoyo down and just like hit him with the standing guillotine. And then just like a bulldog choke within a minute.
Yeah. Dude, it was, he just really, and we know this is a strategy now, just like overwhelming guys, but he never let this guy get off. Like, apparently in all 78 victories, this guy has never seen someone charge like this. He just, at no point in time was Moncoyo in the fight. He was just defending move after move after move after move. Pat Smith looked good. He was throwing like knees from the clinch. He had a guillotine in. He eventually, after Rudyard Moncoyo gets up, Pat Smith grabs this brutal rear naked choke without any hooks in and then rips him back to the ground. You felt like his spine was going to snap and he's tapping immediately. Like, honestly, this is one of those fights where he was so overwhelmed. You don't know how this fight would look if they both started kind of like quote unquote fair, but Pat Smith got it done, man.
Yeah. Goat shit, dude.
Yeah, dude. Goat shit only. Champ shit only. Yeah. Pat Smith he's not allowed in Ecuador.
Fight number 4, we have Dave Bentau versus Oleg Takarov. Dave is a Canadian wrestler. He was in the finals of UFC 5. Wrestling and judo expert. 27 years old, 6'2", 258 pounds. Versus Oleg, Russian Sambo champion. 27 years old, 6 foot, 210 pounds. We had to go back and rewatch this because I just did not remember. But Bentau
which thankfully led us to realize we didn't hit record.
Yeah, very true.
So,
yeah.
You know, in some ways, good.
True, bro. If we did the whole episode without knowing, that would have been horrible.
That would have been bad. Maybe we'll put that audio up just for fuck's sake.
Right. But so Bentau just like shoots for a double leg. And
very aggressive,
like grappling exchanges, gets the better of Oleg, who's like a Sambo champion.
Lands a few nice little brutal ground and pound strikes.
Yeah.
Oleg gets up. Dave Bentau lands even more brutal strikes standing up. He is on a mission, just throwing strikes.
He was inspired by Pat Smith.
Yeah, inspired by Pat Smith and the fact that he was in the finals last time. He probably wanted to get there again, maybe thought he could do better.
Right.
Oleg ends up shooting his own takedown. Pat Smith flips him over, reverses that, and gets his own takedown based off of that. Then Pat Smith goes for a takedown. Oleg pulls guard, grabs the guillotine, locks that motherfucker in tight, and then not Pat Smith, Dave Bentau. Dave Bentau taps.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward fight. This one, again, was starting to look a little bit more modern. We had strikes, we had wrestling, we had cage work, we had a little bit of everything, and the guillotine. That's the first guillotine we've seen? No. Yeah,
there's no way.
That's the first guillotine. That was the first guillotine finish that we've seen. Pat Smith pulled it in the last one, but he ended up going for the rear naked choke for the finish.
Oh, wow. You might be right. Shit.
Yeah. And it seems like because Dan Severn, and I've kind of heard this before, but because Dan Severn was the beast returns and the champion and kind of the big scary guy in this tournament, even though he was just fighting in the super fight tonight, I think people start to realize like trends, right? Like first it was Hoist Gracie with jiu-jitsu. Then it was Dan Severn with wrestling, and a huge way to combat wrestling is the guillotine because guys shoot with their head on the outside. jiu-jitsu guys or whoever grab it and throw the guillotine in. So I think this is going to be something we're going to be looking out for.
Yeah, I mean, that literally happened.
Yeah.
Fight number 5 is the first semifinal match. We have the boy, Tank Abbott, versus Paul Valerin. And I honestly didn't think Valerin was going to fight in this because they asked him after that fight and they were just like, you ready for Tank Abbott? And he was just kind of like, he gave like an indecision answer. He was like, oh, I don't know. We'll see, or something like that.
Oh, I thought he was real pumped for it.
No. And then I was like, oh, there's no way he's going to tap or he's going to pussy out. But he didn't. And
because also another thing is that is like it's almost like guys pull out more than they don't in this early UFC.
Right.
Which it's tournament style. They're fighting very brutal fights and fighting more than once per night.
It's understandable, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah. But he should have pulled out, dude, because Tank fucked him up.
Yeah. Tank just chased him down, attacked him the same. Now keep in mind, this guy is 6'8" and Tank's probably what, 5'10". Tank is just chasing this dude down, throwing punches, gets him up against the cage. The guy tries to throw his signature, trap elbow. Tank's head is nowhere to be found. Tank's head is stuck deep into the cage, which he could have guillotined him, or not into the cage. Tank's head was like on the guy's side. Tank hits a single leg, brings him down. And then it's not like the ground and pound was that brutal from a technical standpoint, but I would argue the most brutal ground and pound of all time, because Tank was just dropping blows from hell on this guy's head. And then Tank was putting his knee into this guy's face and just rubbing it and smashing his knee into this guy's face. I don't mean even like lifting it and smashing it. I mean, he was just like grinding it into this guy's face. And then looking up at whoever was immediately outside the cage and just in pure bliss grinning from ear to ear. Yeah. This is where you realize, like, and even Jim Brown was saying, like,
this guy is different. He has no respect. He's from the streets. He's doing a lot of things that are different. It has nothing to do with the martial arts. This guy is a street fighter.
This is a different kind of motherfucker. He is a street fighter. He's brutal. He is doing different things. Disgusting. I mean, Tank is an animal.
Truly. Yeah, you summed that up perfectly. And all that happened within like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was quick.
Like, that's how, like, Tank is just pure destruction, bro.
Pure destruction. Very, very, very strong. I mean, and he has to have some wrestling skill, dude, because he hit a perfect single leg, took this guy down effortlessly. I would argue, as bad as this was and as brutal as this was, I would argue that was a premature stoppage.
Yeah. Agreed. Because Valerin's got up pretty fast and he wasn't
protested.
Dazed. He wasn't, and immediately protested. Yeah. Maybe the first like bad ref stoppage we've seen.
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that John McCarthy could have and should have stopped the first Tank Abbott fight earlier but I don't think he'd seen a knockout this brutal yet.
Right.
And because Tank definitely landed an extra punch on John Matua. So maybe he was kind of thinking about the fighter's safety, which is absolutely an admirable thing to be thinking about.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Anything else on this?
Not for me. How about you?
No, once again, I think Tank is kind of separating himself from the pack as just this brutal psychopath. From here, we went into, what was the next fight?
It was the second semifinal match.
Oh,
where Pat Smith.
Oh, you're right.
Didn't fight due to stomach cramps.
Yeah, which
is the most pussy shit like ever.
Yeah,
Yeah. But who is it? Anthony Msias stepped in against Takarov. And this must be the one I was thinking of earlier because immediately Msias shoots and just gets choked out with a guillotine from bottom guard. 10 seconds.
Yeah. It's crazy that they almost didn't talk about it more because Takarov was like 2-0 in guillotines in UFC 6. Nothing to it. There was a little bit of controversy about who was going to step in because there was Guy Mesger who won a fight earlier. There was another guy that they showed winning some brutal fight earlier, which where the fuck are these fights? They're not on the ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
And apparently these two were friends, but it was just a very simple technique win by Takarov.
Yeah, Takarov part 2 with the guillotine choke.
Yep.
But then we have the super fight between Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock. Dan, 37 years old, 260 pounds, 6'2", the Beast, coming off of the UFC 5 win, versus Ken Shamrock, Pancrase champion, 31 years old, 6 foot, 220 pounds. Put on about 20 pounds of muscle because he was like 205 and he
Definitely
looked
pure
jacked
steroids.
for this fight. Yeah, 100% pure steroids.
He looked insane. The camera angles they were using also helped.
You want to describe this fight?
Yeah, dude. So this fight was just, I think there was like one punch each thrown in this fight. It almost looked to me like Dan kind of shocked Ken with a little bit of a punch. But this fight was just a lot of grips. Underhooks and kind of neck grips, a lot of wrestling threats. Dan is obviously a much more decorated wrestler and way bigger. He kind of was in on a single leg from Ken, but it seemed like Ken knew to threaten him with chokes. And Ken was sprawling. Ken was impressive in this fight, man. Ken was just defensively sound. And eventually Ken held him off for a while after a couple more threats. He threatened the guillotine a couple times. And then at one point he threatened with the guillotine, which forced Dan to stop the takedown threat. And then Ken just ran him forward, ran Dan back to his butt while holding the guillotine choke. Dan tapped and it was over. Ken proved he is the most dangerous man in the world. In my opinion, we'll talk about this later, but this was very telling.
Yeah.
Huge fight.
Yeah.
Huge fight. Beautiful victory for Ken. He looked fantastic.
Which was, for real. And which was honestly, it was his game plan like the whole time. And he talked about it in the post-fight interview, which was most analytical, intelligent post-fight interview so far that we've ever seen.
We ought to put a link up just to that interview because that interview was really summed up the fight immediately after, and you're right, he was thoughtful. It really good.
He basically was like, Severn's like known for like Greco style wrestling, so I know he's gonna give up his neck. We trained for that. We trained guillotines, and it worked. I mean, he brought in people who were Dan's size to wrestle him in training camp, and he really like prepared very well for this fight, and you could see it in the execution.
And two, if you guys know anything about kind of the history of the Shamrocks, Bob Shamrock was kind of like had like a home for boys. He was the, I guess I don't know what you call this, like the dad in place for Ken Shamrock, for
like
Frank
foster
Shamrock.
dad.
Foster dad, maybe adopted the kids, I guess did adopt them, and he was there in the ring. Ken seems to really admire him. We know that Ken trains at the Lion's Den. I believe Guy Mesger, who had a victory earlier, trains at the Lion's Den. I think just really kind of the first modern approach to training in the UFC. And Ken is also, keep in mind, a champion over in Pancrase in Japan. Impressed. Just couldn't say enough about Ken. This fight, I was more impressed with Ken in this fight than I was with Hoist Gracie in all of his fights.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that. I would agree with that. We have the finals now.
Yeah, what do we got?
Tank Abbott versus Takarov.
Mm-hmm. 2 hours later.
Yeah. I mean, what is it with these final fights, dude? Yeah. I feel like it's been like that for consecutive main events, but this one was just a snooze fest, bro.
Oh, yeah.
Open guard for like 20 minutes with Abbott just laying on Takarov with a little ground and pound here and there. John McCarthy threatened to stand it up probably about 7,000 times.
Yeah. Saying one more warning.
Right.
And finally did.
Finally did around, 15 minutes?
15 minutes, yeah, something
maybe
like that.
Maybe a little later. And they were both just completely gassed. Again, going back to the elevation issue. I mean, even if they gave them oxygen masks in between the fight and still came back, they would have been gassed. Like, they were destroyed.
Oh, it was horrible, yeah. Taktarov's eyes were closed for 30% of the fight.
He really, he was
literally
laying there
sleeping.
Yeah.
Now, in all fairness, the fight did start off with the fight did start off with fucking Tank just throwing bombs.
Right.
Takarov kind of tried to clinch, and Tank just slams his ass to the ground. But after that, he was just like Kevin said, laying in his open guard, not trying to pass, hardly trying to throw punches. He just had his arms up on like inside of Takarov's armpits. Really just a pathetic display. I mean, I feel like they would have I'm not even being funny. I think they would have disqualified both of these guys in the modern UFC. I don't know.
Oh, for sure.
There's no precedent for me to know what they would have done in the modern UFC with a fight like this, because it was awful.
Yeah. They stand him up, and believe it or not, after Takarov looked even more gassed than Tank Abbott for the whole time while he was laying on the ground, right? They stand it up, and this actually works to Takarov's advantage, because I guess like Tank presses him kind of against the fence, and he reverses it.
Yep.
Gets Tank's back, or he gets something else before he got his back. I don't really remember, but he ends up getting Tank's back and sinks in a rear naked choke at like, what, 17 minutes of that fight?
Oh, it wasn't a guillotine?
No.
Yeah, he did get a couple guillotine threats on the way down. At one point, Tank took him down with the guillotine. Takarov had the guillotine sunk in. Tank took him down and popped his head out.
But it was like a half-ass rear naked choke. Like I feel like he had the body triangle a little bit, not even cinched in, but just a half-ass body triangle and half-ass like grip on the neck.
Yeah.
And that was still enough for Tank to tap.
Terrible fucking fight. Absolutely terrible fight. At the end of the fight, okay, after watching this and seeing, like, they brought in oxygen masks. Both guys were laying on the ground. Takarov could not get up. And frankly, they didn't even do anything. So I don't know why they were so exhausted, because they were both laying on the ground for 80. I'd say, if we actually boiled it down, I'd say it was probably 95% of this fight.
Oh, for sure.
That said, Takarov did take a beating. A couple little things that Tank was doing. Tank was like literally choking Takarov with his hands, like brutal, like you would imagine a man killing his wife. Tank was dropping his forearm into Takarov's fucking...
Yeah, dude. I was like, he's going to break his windpipe doing that. Like, that's crazy. Forearm from a 280-pound man into your neck?
Yeah.
That's insane.
And a very strong one at that. Just disgusting. And yeah, this fight just sucked. I mean, Takarov won, but by the end of it, he could not stand up. If someone told me that Takarov died after that fight due to exhaustion, would you be honest? I know that would be shocking, just because, wow, I didn't know you could die of exhaustion. Would you be surprised?
No, dude. I mean, I was like, we were making a joke, but like that was the winner when they showed him laying on the ground.
Yeah.
Tank Abbott, after he tapped, he got up, walked away. He seemed okay. The winner, bro, was laying on the ground and couldn't breathe. They had to get the oxygen mask on him, and people had to hold him up. Like he couldn't walk on his own.
Look at this fucking guy and remember that he won. Look at him.
Yeah.
I mean, brutal. And that was it, man. That was UFC 6.
The Takarov show, dude.
The Takarov show. The Guillotine City. G City.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. Brian Ortega, eat your heart out.
Ortega.
Cool,
go into the awards?
I loved this event. Let's get into kind of takeaways. I guess the takeaway that I did not want to mention was that the guillotine is in full force now.
Yeah.
Wrestlers beware.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wrestlers beware. We've gone through like 3 phases of the UFC so far. One of them is basically, if you fought Hoist, you were going to lose by submission because Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is superior.
Not even submission, by top mount, can't get out of top mount.
Just by lack of education, basically.
Yeah.
Then there were brawlers, and generally the bigger, stronger guy won. And then there were wrestlers, and now there's the guillotine. I feel like those are kind of the 3 eras that we've experienced over 6 UFCs.
I would agree with that. And honestly, the guillotine came pretty fast. Like, that was a quick counter to the wrestling heavy styles of like UFC 4 and 5.
Yeah. I'd be kind of curious to almost dig into what the history of the guillotine is, because it almost seems too convenient to have all of a sudden been developed. I'm sure there was something to it. Maybe there's even something in wrestling for it. But really interesting because Dan the Beast Severn, a lot of broken promises. I mean, you would think this guy was going to run the UFC for like 4 years.
True.
And he just, dude, another big takeaway. Fucking Ken. But yeah, let's get into awards.
Yeah. Well, about Dan too. Well, I don't know if this matters. Or
Go.
But you know, when he's coming in at 37 years old now.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of old.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter in this era. Maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe it's just like Ken is just that good. And maybe Dan at 37 years old can still whip a lot of people's asses.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure he could.
Yeah. But let's get into the
I
awards.
don't know how relevant 37 years of age is at this level.
Yeah.
Ken looked great. But let's get into the awards.
Knockout of the night. I mean, there's no argument, dude. Tank Abbott starting the night off with 4 consecutive right hands on John Matua, and while John Matua was falling, he hit him with another right hand.
Yeah,
like brutal, absolutely brutal.
No argument from me. Tank Abbott knocks out John Matua brutally. Knockout of the night. Also, one quick thing about Tank. Do you notice that thing that Tank did where he was kind of charging and like he would throw some punches and they look. Excuse me. Tank would throw punches and they looked great, but he also did this thing where he like pushed with his punch.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't almost seem like it wasn't a jab or something. It almost looked like he was marching forward with his hand out.
And he would honestly push with his other hand too. Like he would like push and kind of swing and push and kind of swing just to get people against the fence and to become helpless.
Outside of the fact that he had zero cardio, Tank is like a born fighter. It's obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Knockout of the night. We both agree on that.
Who's your submission of the night?
Ooh, submission of the night.
I have mine, but I don't know who you got.
Man, you know, I have a couple thoughts on submission of the night. I gotta say, I'm very taken with the guillotine.
Okay.
Just as a response. So from a technique perspective, I'm taken with the guillotine. So really any of Oleg Takarov's guillotines would be impressive. However, I hesitate to give the award to Pat Smith because that was just like a brutal, that almost just seemed like a dude in a bar. There didn't seem like much to it. So I'm going to go with the Oleg Takarov submitting Dave Bentau with a guillotine.
Okay. Yeah, I give it to Pat Smith.
Okay. Absolutely fair. That was brutal.
Just, I don't know. The brutality of it. Yeah. I was just like, holy shit. I thought it was award worthy.
Yeah. We'll show both of them, but yeah.
No technique to it. It was just pure strength.
Yeah. And just disgusting. I mean,
but he got it for me.
He got it, man. And it was brutal. And I'll tell you that one had to have hurt more.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not going to disagree with you. I'll personally go with Oleg Takarov over Dave Bentau, but Pat Smith is a great option for that. What's next?
Fight of the night? I think we agree on this one too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carl Warsam versus Paul Valerin.
Just the greatest 45 seconds fucking in MMA history up until UFC 6.
Yeah.
Just two absolute fucking savages swinging at each other. One of them out to prove that one of them just sales were down at his Taekwondo school and he was out to fucking resurrect that, get his mortgage back, fucking get his life back together, make his wife fall back in love with him. This guy was putting everything into these punches and it was just not going to work because he fell right into the trap of the trap master. Big Daddy Polar Bear Flex, OG, what's his name?
Paul Valerin.
Paul Valerin. I'm stalling because I can't remember that big psycho fucking idiot's name. Guy was a serial killer.
Yeah, both these guys, man, they were so game to fight. I mean, there was no like, let me try grabbing a leg here. It was just, no, let me fuck this dude up.
Yeah.
And Paul ultimately got the better of Carl.
Yeah, dude. Awesome fucking fight.
Awesome fight. Awesome fights in general.
Awesome fight card. And honestly, there was a good 45 to maybe even 60 seconds of the final that was great. It's just that everything else of the 17 and a half minutes was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
So, anything else?
No, that's it for me on UFC 6. How about you?
No, man, I'm impressed.
Oh, let's talk about pound for pound.
Let me hear yours first.
I mean, Ken number one.
I agree.
Ken number one. And I don't know if they do rematch, but if they do, I think he smokes Hoist Gracie if they fight again.
Man, Hoist is so skilled at just keeping himself safe on the ground, though.
He is. I was just thinking Ken put on 20 pounds of muscle and could be more aggressive. But maybe he gets caught easier. I don't know, man. I'm just like, is Hoist Gracie overrated?
When people talk about Hoist Gracie being on their Mount Rushmore, I think that we have 35 years or 32 years of wishful thinking and idealization. I think the plain and simple truth is Hoist Gracie was given favorable matchups. I think the super fights were invented for him to avoid Dan Severn because I think Dan Severn would have beat him again. I think that, and you said this, Kevin, but I think Ken Shamrock, by any modern standard, absolutely beat Hoist Gracie 50-45 in their second fight.
Oh, yeah, true. Yep.
Yes, Hoist Gracie was overrated. Do you think Hoist Gracie's overrated?
Yeah, I think so, just because I feel like, that's what I was going to say. Hoist Gracie reminds me of when NBA people talk about somebody like Bob Cousy, bro. Bob Cousy, some white plumber from like 1950s or 1960s. He was like really good at the time, but like, can Bob Cousy do shit now? Can Bob Cousy do anything 10 years later? Nah, man, it was just his time, right? And Hoist Gracie was really good for his time of how underdeveloped the UFC was. And so you have guys like Dan, you have guys like Ken who like did pretty well, or Dan lost to him, but Ken did really well against him. And I think for that, Ken's my number one.
Hoist Gracie had the element of surprise, and that's it.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is. Ken would never fall for that shit again. Dan Severn probably wouldn't fall for that shit again. But guess what? If you get in a fight at the bar with some fucking dude and he's 5'2" and you're 6'8" and you get your arm ripped off, that's all anyone's ever going to talk about. They're not going to talk about the element of surprise. They're going to talk about you got your ass beat by a fucking 5'2", 130-pound guy.
Yeah.
And that's what Hoist Gracie had. We know Hoist Gracie has a future. I don't know what that is personally. All I know of Hoist Gracie is like all these fights and then obviously his fight with Matt Hughes at like UFC 58 or something.
Yeah, this is interesting because I'm like, is Hoist going to come back in this era right now, like before UFC 10 and still dominate?
I think he goes to Pride. I think Hoist would have lost to 2 or 3 guys tonight.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't know if he comes back. If he does, I would be very shocked if he does well. But you're saying he doesn't, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
At this point, anything moving forward, anything from like now until like UFC 45, I'm guessing on.
Okay. And yeah, shit sped up quick, man. Like, as you said, we're kind of like in like the era, whatever, of like guillotines.
G City,
dude. And like, it changed so fast. We're on 6 events right now. And we've like, you know,
which that just means that the UFC, we are witnessing it change the world of combat.
Oh, that's a good point.
We are witnessing it in live time within a few months change the world of combat.
It must be growing exponentially, even in these early stages.
Has to be.
Yeah.
Has to be. And I love it. I loved this event. This is my favorite event yet.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
Pound
for
pound.
Ken the GOAT, number 1. I guess Dan at 2. I don't know. Do you put Dan or Hoist at 2?
You gotta go Hoist.
Yeah,
dude.
you have to.
I mean, in some
Tank Abbott at 2.
Oh man, no, because Tank lost. Oleg Takarov.
Ken, Hoist, Dan. I guess at this point, Tank. I don't know. He lost. No, I guess at this point it would be fucking Oleg, which we'll just do 3 for now.
Crazy. As of UFC 6, I'm gonna go Ken at number 1, Hoist at number 2.
You have to.
Oleg Takarov is number 3. Dan Severn is number 4. And Tank Abbott is number 5. And quite frankly, I think the only 2 real relevant people in there is Dan and Ken.
Why do you put Oleg over Dan?
Because he won the fucking...
Yeah, but Dan won
5. Won one also. Then I'll go Dan above Oleg.
Yeah.
But dude, Dan keeps...
He lost to Ken.
And he lost to Hoist. But another thing is this... is like shame on Dan for not like thinking that something can happen. Like, why has he twice lost by submission?
Yeah.
That's why I have him. Whereas Oleg took a fucking beating and came through on the other side.
That is true.
Anything else for the event?
No. How about you?
No. Guys, kick-ass fucking event.
Yeah.
Get on UFC Fight Pass or ESPN Plus, wherever you can find it. Watch UFC 6. If you want to follow along with us, you can do so on all of our social channels. We're at Casual Academy MMA. New episodes coming out every Tuesday at noon. This is what we're doing. We're watching all the UFC, Pride, WEC, and Strikeforce events in chronological historical order, and let me tell you, it's a fucking blast. So if you want to join with us, I recommend you watch along. You can check out our highlights on all of those places. You can check out our commentary, but there's just nothing like the real thing. Get on and watch that shit. We're having a fucking blast doing it, and we're excited for you guys to join along with us.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
All right. We're going to actually go back and do a couple things now. So we'll see you guys next time at UFC 7. And we'll see if the reigning defending champion Oleg,
Takarov.
the exhausted Takarov,
The exhausted.
can come back and make it happen. Guys, this has been Casual Academy. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.
Peace.
I practiced a guillotine because I saw him duck his head a lot to grab a leg. So I knew he was going to do that. I wanted to wear him down a little bit in the middle of the ring, make him use some energy trying to take me down. I knew he was going to drive me into the fence. So as soon as I felt he was a little tired, I let him drive into the fence. I knew he was going to reach for the leg. I ran down and choked him.